Hello everyone, welcome back to the Sky News Daily. Niall Paterson here, and we're beginning the week with a little bit of heckling.
Give us our land back! Give us what you stole from us! Our bones, our skulls, our babies, our people! You destroyed our land! Give us a treaty! We want a treaty in this country!
Charles and Camilla are in Australia for the King's first overseas visit since becoming monarch. They were meeting with Aussie parliamentarians in Canberra, and let's be honest, it wasn't exactly the reception they were expecting.
You are a genocide! This is not your land! This is not your land! You are not our kids! You are not our kids!
Now, that was Senator Lydia Thorpe. She's the first female indigenous politician that the state of Victoria has elected to Australia's upper house. And she certainly has form. This is just the latest in a series of public demonstrations by Ms Thorpe. But her very public declaration that "you are not my king" is a view shared by many Australians, indigenous or otherwise. Our royal correspondent, Laura Bundock, was in the room where the King was making that speech to Australian politicians and dignitaries. And look, Laura, Charles did make reference, didn't he, to the plight of Australia's Aboriginal peoples. I mean, there was no apology, as some would have wanted, but he did address it.
So we were in what is called the Great Hall. It's big old room inside Parliament House. Politicians, dignitaries, you name it, they were there. There are a couple of speeches, one from the Prime Minister, one from the Leader of the Opposition. King stands up, and this is a big moment for him, yeah. It's a keynote moment. These speeches are sort of set piece, they're long planned, but what none of us, I think, saw coming was what happened at the end of his speech, which was he sort of takes his seat, and then from nowhere and unexpectedly, Lydia Thorpe pops up. She's wearing a sort of traditional outfit and she starts shouting directly at the King. And it was an extraordinary moment. It'd been very, very formal up until this point. And this really kind of created this almost an atmosphere of disbelief. Because I think the one thing you can say is that Australians don't really protest as much as, say, we might do in the UK. So this outburst came from nowhere, took everyone by surprise, not least the King. And the Queen sort of nervously looked to the person on to her side. The King looked to the person on his side, who was the Prime Minister. And they sort of started this almost strange conversation, chatting away while all this was going on, while the security guards kind of got closer to Senator Thorpe to sort of try and move her out of the building. She was accusing the King of genocide. She was accusing him of being connected to the stolen generation, those children of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders who were taken from their homes, were taken away. It's been a huge controversy in Australia, a really dark moment of history. And she was shouting, "You're not my king, this is not your land."
OK, so who exactly is Lydia Thorpe then?
She's an independent senator. She is known for these sorts of outbursts. I think one person, a political reporter who's Australian and based there, was describing her as a firebrand, really, someone who does make these big statements. She is the state of Victoria's first female Aboriginal senator, and the Senate is the upper house there, so she has every right to be in the Parliament.
And Charles had made direct reference to the indigenous peoples in the remarks that he made. I mean, he didn't go as far as many of those indigenous leaders would have liked and issue an apology, but he did make reference to it. And I suppose this must have been deeply, deeply embarrassing for the Royal Touring Party.
This day in Canberra really mattered, you know, the landlocked capital, the chance to sort of go to Parliament, do all the things he did, the national monuments, everything like that, all overshadowed by what happened. And look, the first thing he said in this speech, after sort of thanking everyone for inviting him, he talked about how moved he was by the welcome to country ceremony, which was performed as he sort of stepped off the plane. So he's landing on the tarmac, shakes a few hands of dignitaries, and then stood on the tarmac is an Indigenous leader. And she does this ceremony, which is a very, very traditional Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander ceremony. She is Auntie Serena Williams, gives him the welcome to country. There's a smoking ceremony as well. The King very much engaging in all of this. But we caught up with her afterwards. I asked her directly, do you think the King should apologise for colonial wrongs? And despite giving him this big welcome, she said yes. She said, I think he should. We've got all of us roles and responsibilities. She has a role and responsibility to her people. And she said, I think an apology from the king would be beautiful. She did say, you know, the king comes with a very good heart. She said a very good spirit, and it's probably something he'd like to do. But yes, he needs to say sorry. And I said, well, is that big speech? Would that be the moment you'd like to hear him say sorry? And she said, yes, very much so. But of course, the king, although he acknowledged, he didn't go as far as saying sorry. He talked about First Nation people who have looked after the country for thousands and thousands of years, and how he'd witnessed in his previous visits what he described as the courage and the hope guiding the nation's long and difficult journey towards reconciliation. And so he acknowledged all of that.
Why on earth did Charles and Camilla choose Australia then for their first overseas trip with him as head of state? Because, you know, as well as the indigenous rights debate, which is incredibly live in Australia right now, I mean, this is a place that is known for its republicanism. You know, they've had a referendum in the past. Majority opinion, I still think, is pretty clearly against the monarchy. Why, of all places, did they choose Oz?
Talk to people about republicanism, and while you might get a majority saying, yes, we would support a republic, you cannot get consensus on the model that would replace the monarchy. And that was the big problem in 1999 when I held a referendum on exactly this. And I don't get a sense that this is a big priority for Australians. So on paper, especially younger Australians, for whom there is a less of a connection with the old country, less of a connection with the UK and England, they would say, yes, we want a republic. But actually, when you look at the cost of holding a referendum, the effort it takes, the divisions it causes, and remember the last referendum split the republic vote as well. So there's often, because they've got compulsory voting here, there is a whole chunk of people who are a bit of, they call them the if you don't know, vote no. And it's sort of stacked against, you need not just a national majority, you need a majority of states these referendums. So they're really, really hard to pass. And Australia found out last year with the indigenous voice referendum that the government held and lost, that they are tricky, really tricky. So I think republicanism is where it's at. We caught up actually in Sydney on Sunday with the Australian Republic movement. They don't protest, they don't wave banners, they don't shout, "Not my king," as you'd see in the UK. They were having a beer in a bar. But I think they're going for the slowly approach. They're going for the long game, and they think it'll just naturally evolve. But it's an interesting question. But as for why the King and Queen chose Australia, it is a big, significant realm. I mean, it also coincides with the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting in Samoa, so we're in that neck of the woods, really. But there is a very close connection between Britain and Australia. And I think the King obviously wanted to use this trip to focus on the things that the two countries have in common, have had in common, and will have in common in the future. But yeah, this is a reminder that Australia has a painful past. It still has a painful past, and its history is still haunting it to this day.
Laura, let's pause there because Sky has been speaking to Senator Thorpe, so let's have a listen. Here she is justifying her very public intervention to Kay Burley on the Breakfast programme.
Why did you do it?
I did it for truth-telling, global truth-telling about the royals who caused so much devastation to not only our people in this country, but Indigenous people around the world. We don't have a treaty in this country. We've been calling for decades and decades for a treaty. We just want peace. To see the incarceration rates of our people in this country, our jails are full of Aboriginal people. We have thousands, 23,000 Aboriginal children that have been taken from their families. We have over 600 deaths in custody where no one has ever been held accountable. We have our bones and our skulls still in his possession or his family's possession. We want that back. We want our land back, and we want your king to take some leadership and sit at the table and discuss a treaty with us, because treaty is what will bring us peace. The kings before him and the queens before him did treaties with other nations or other countries, but we are still fighting for a treaty here, and until we have peace, we must continue to resist.
He acknowledged, recognised grievances within his speech, and then towards the end of the speech you interrupted him and called him genocidal. Why is that the best way to deal with this?
I just did a previous interview, with all due respect, and I did not once interrupt his speech. I respectfully waited.
Question. I'm sorry, I am going to interrupt you because I've only got a limited amount of time, Senator. Why did you call him genocidal?
Which is the King's speech.
Why did you call him genocidal?
I waited till the end.
Why did you call him genocidal?
There's thousands of massacre sites in this country from invasion, and someone needs to answer for that.
And that's the King.
And if he is the successor, then he needs to answer.
Okay.
Thank you very
one of your
much.
colleagues described you as abusing your position, and your intervention was disgraceful. How do you respond to that?
I'm not fussed about what people say about me. I will continue to fight for justice for my people. We are the real sovereigns in this country. The King is not our sovereign. The King lives in your country. He's from your country. He can't be our King. So I don't really, I have the support of Aboriginal people around this country. I have the support from my grandmother. I have support from elders around the country. You might look, put up the scary photos, but I will continue to resist. And it's only when other people have their children removed, when their families are incarcerated, when you have your land taken from you, that you will understand what I'm talking about. But I understand that, it's all about portraying me as an angry black woman. Well, yeah, I'm angry. I'm angry because I see too many of our people dying, too many people incarcerated. We don't have any land. Your King and his previous kings and queens stole that from us, and we want it back, and we won't stop resisting.
OK, so that's the Senator in her own words. We'll be back in Canberra with our royal correspondent in just a moment. Stay where you are. Welcome back. Republicanism has long been a theme of Australian politics, but it never seems to quite get over the line, so to speak. Back in 1999, despite a decade of polls apparently showing majority were in favour of Australia becoming a republic, once again Australians failed to vote for change. Our royal correspondent Laura Bundock is travelling with the King. Laura, I've heard the phrase lazy republicanism used before. You've got a majority in favour of change, but when push comes to shove, sometimes it's just easier to continue with the system that's already in place. But for some Australians of a certain age, don't they look back at 1975, the Queen's representative, the Governor-General, John Kerr, sacking the Labour Prime Minister, Gough Whitlam? I mean, I truly wonder if they've ever really gotten over that.
I think Gough Whitlam, still resonates with a generation. But I think for younger generations who weren't there, whose parents weren't there either, I'm not sure it does anymore. Honest to God, I was expecting to come to Australia and feel more of a sense of republicanism, particularly because there was a sense that the late Queen was so respected, so revered, that it didn't really matter which side of the debate you sat on. She was the Queen of Australia. She had earned her place there, and perhaps with her passing, there would be a resurgence of feeling, but it hasn't happened. It really hasn't happened. And I do think the fundamental issue is because stuff like the cost of living, the economy, health, all of this is more important right now than the mega constitutional change and another mega vote, the effort of all that. It's simply because the King isn't here that much, because he doesn't really do that much. They don't see him out and about in the way we would in the UK. It's sort of all right. It's an interesting one, and that debate is never going to go away, is it? In fact, a lot of the Aussie press was saying, it's only the British media that care about republicanism, we don't really care. And maybe there's a point there, I don't know.
Is it better to view that frosty political reception as less to do with republicanism, less to do with concerns about the monarchy, and more to do with domestic political issues, including the rights of the First Nation peoples?
I absolutely think that. And, there are some elections going on at the same time as well. Canberra's a long way away from some of the states and territories. Yeah, there's all of that feeding into it. But, you have an Australian Prime Minister at the moment who has this long-standing commitment to hold a second referendum on becoming a republic. And even he has kicked that into the long grass. So, I don't know how else this would happen, because it felt like, obviously it failed in 1999, but this would be the moment. And because the Australian terms are really short, it's 3 years. So you can't hold a referendum until the next term starts. Will he be around then? I don't know. But, even his minister that he had appointed for the Republic, he's got to be put on another brief now. That job doesn't exist. So there's just no appetite. There just isn't the political appetite at the moment.
Laura, predictions for the rest of the tour, a tour which, was already truncated, let's not forget, when Charles got on the plane in the first place.
I think they'll be glad to leave Canberra. Let me put it that way. They go back to Sydney tomorrow, and if the sun is out, Sydney can sparkle and pull out all the stops. It really can. I'm biased. I lived there for a bit. I love Sydney, but there's a lot of kind of much more public-facing engagements. My big question today, actually, Neil, was why hadn't they addressed the indigenous issue earlier on in this trip? So with just a few days of engagements, why not do something right at the start? Because there's this big event taking place in Sydney tomorrow on the last day. If they'd done it on the first day, would it perhaps have muted the reaction to what we saw in Parliament today? I'm not saying it would have done, but why didn't they hit this issue head on? It's just a thought I had when I was stood there thinking, how has this happened? Why are we talking, So that's the thought. But I think tomorrow in Sydney, we'll see the Opera House, we'll see the harbour, there's a barbecue. It could not get more Australian. So I think they'll be hoping that when they leave Canberra that they've drawn a line under this. But they have definitely been reminded that their disrupted day ended quietly, but this debate about Indigenous rights isn't going away quietly.
Laura, thanks very much. That's your lot for today. If you want the very latest on the Royal Tour, what is happening down under, just head to skynews.com. We'll see you again tomorrow.